Amen. You may be seated. On your way to your seat, look over to your neighbor and ask him, do you know him? Do you know him? Do you know him? Ask somebody else, do you know him? Because some of us are also addicted to dysfunctional relationships. We have a tendency to hang around dead things and dead people. You know what I'm talking about. Addicted to dysfunctional relationships. You seem to be attracted to folks that keep up drama. Addicted to dysfunctional relationships. Attracted to people that like to gossip. Addicted to dysfunctional relationships. Here, the Bible doesn't tell us anything about his personals. We don't know if he has a wife and children at home that are waiting on daddy to get it together and come back home so that the family can be whole again. We don't know anything about him. We don't know if he's a diabetic. We don't know if he's struggling with cancer or not. We don't know if he uses an inhaler from time to time while walking through the graveyard because he gets short of breath. We don't know anything about him. There is no actual proof that he had ever even seen Jesus before. There's no evidence here to suggest that he should have known in verse number 6 who Jesus was when he even saw him from afar off. There's nothing here. The Bible contradicts my logic because it says that the demon-possessed man noticed Jesus afar off. He responded, he ran, and then he worshiped him. Can I stick a pin right there? How is it possible that this demon-possessed man is able to recognize Jesus afar off? And some of us saved, sanctified Christians, been fighting on the battlefield a long time, know our Bible, know a couple verses by heart. How is it possible that he's able to notice Jesus afar off, and yet Jesus can come in the building, his presence can fill the temple, and sometimes we just chill like he ain't even here. Sometimes we just chill like we don't even know what he looked like. Sometimes we just chill like we don't even recognize the very presence of God. Since we're on the subject, we're going to throw the disciples under the bus with us. How is it possible that this demon-possessed man is able to recognize Jesus, but yet Peter, who spent all of this time with Jesus, who walked with him all the time, who probably shared a tent or two with Jesus, who has seen Jesus perform miracles, how is it possible that Peter is not able to recognize Jesus coming towards him, walking on the water? He has the audacity to ask Jesus if he's Jesus. Lord, if it's you, let me walk out on the water. God, if it's really you, let me come out there where you are. God, if it's really you, let a check come in the mail and then I'll pay my tithes. God, if it's really you, he's able to recognize him and that he's willing to respond as if he knew him. Philippians chapter 3, verse number 8. Yea, doubtless I count all things but loss for the excellency of the knowledge of Jesus Christ, my Lord, for whom I've suffered the loss of all things, and do count them to be dung, that I may know Christ. Paul makes this statement here. He pens his experiences as he realizes that even his education and success as a Roman and being known as a student of Gamaliel was nothing in comparison to knowing Christ as Lord. I've got a wristband on and bought this. And when I meet my goal, my wristband lights up and it says, go Nakia, go Nakia, go Nakia. And lets me know it really does. I wish I was close and I could show you. Not even close today. And it lights up to let me know that I have met my goal. Further down in the book of Philippians, chapter number 3, around verse 9 or 10, when you get a chance, read that whole chapter. Paul goes on to say that the goal for him is to know Christ in the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his suffering, so that he'll be able to resemble Christ in the earth. After reading all of these things, and after hearing songs like, what do you know about Jesus? What manner of man is this? And do you know the man? Suggests that knowing Christ is, in fact, the greatest achievement in life. According to A.W. Tozer, He says, what comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. But I'd like to suggest today that how you respond to him is just as, if not more important than what you know about him. I can prove it. Paul knew that these Christians running around Rome had a leader, but it wasn't until he responded to a bright light shining from heaven that caused him to fall off of his donkey and change his mind and decide to make a decision to follow Christ the rest of his life, that he was able to have a real name for him, which is how in Philippians he's able to call him Christ, my Lord. Come here, Moses. Moses in the book of Exodus knew that the Hebrews had a God, but it wasn't until responding to a burning bush in the middle of the desert that he was able to respond to him, give him a yes, and come to know him as I am that I am. Yeah. Gideon, come have a conversation with us today. It wasn't until Gideon in the book of Judges had a conversation with the angel of the Lord and decided to turn the side of the mountain into a laundromat, playing games with God, like make the fleece wet. Okay, now make the fleece dry. Okay, now make the fleece wet. Okay, if you're really God, now make the fleece dry again. It wasn't until he started to have an encounter with God and he responded to the call of God that he was able to call him Jehovah Sikkenu, the God who would be able to fight for me. I'm almost done. I told y'all that. The Shunammite woman, come here, what she had left, that she was able to call him Jehovah Jireh, God who is my provider. I'm closing with this. The point is, it don't matter what you know about him. It don't matter what you call him. It only matters how you respond to him when he shows up. Is there anybody in here today that says, I know who God is? I know who he is when he shows up. I can recognize the voice of God when I hear him talking to me. I said, is there anybody in here today that says, I recognize God when he shows up, whether he comes walking on the water or he shows up in a laundromat, whether he comes to me in a McDonald's drive-thru? I can recognize God when I see him. I said, is there anybody in here today that knows how to recognize God? It don't matter what you call him. You can call him a bridge over troubled water. Just make sure you answer when he calls. You can call him a way maker. Just make sure you answer when he called. My grandmother called him a wheel in the middle of a wheel, but just make sure you answer him when he calls. Some know him as a burden bearer. Some know him as a heavy load sharer. Some know him as the rose of Sharon. I'm preaching today. Some know him as the lily of the valley. Some know him as the bright and the morning star. Some know him to be a provider today. Some know him to be a protector today. Some know him to be a way maker out of nowhere. Some know him to be a way in and a way out, a way over and a way under, a way around and a way through. But no matter what you call him, make sure you respond when he calls your name. Our theme this year is answering the call. In other words, whether you call him daddy, whether you call him Abba, whether you call him father, whether you call him friend to the friendless, whether you call him a homie in the midnight hour, whatever it is that you call him, make sure you answer when he calls you. Listen, I dare you to respond to the call of God today. I'm really trying to let this thing go. But I feel help right there when I start thinking about responding to the call of God. Come here, David. David came to know Jesus as somebody that would be a battle advice giver. He went out on the field. They gave him somebody else's armor. But I believe David heard the voice of God in his ear and said, all you need is a smooth stone. He goes out on the battlefield. He throws the stone at him. And that's why later on David can say, I will bless the Lord at all times, and his praises shall continually be in my mouth. My soul shall make her boast in the Lord. The humble shall hear thereof and be glad. Is there anybody in the room today that will magnify the Lord with me? Sometimes praise gets lonely. If there's anybody in here that will magnify the Lord with me, I dare you to throw up your hands and throw back your head and say, I know the voice of God when I hear it. You got to preach that thing. I say, I know the voice of God when I hear it. And when I hear his voice, I will obey. When I hear his voice, I will respond. When I hear his voice, I throw up my hands. When I hear his voice, I might just start clapping. When I hear his voice, I might run down the highway. When I hear his voice, I might do a dance in front of you. When I hear his from my mouth, yes from my mind, yes from my spirit. My whole body says yes, and my mind says yes. Yes to your will, Jesus. Yes to your way, Jesus. Yes, God, I'll serve you. Yes, I will obey. For the rest of my life, I will bless